Good evening. We'll call to order this workshop for the Illinois River Water Partnership with the Siloam Springs Board of Directors for September 20th, 2022. I would like to introduce to the board Mr. Leif Kindberg, and Leif is going to go through the information that he is presenting to us. So Leif, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Mayor Nation, and I'm really honored to be here. I appreciate Ms. Risler also for coming to a recent workshop, and I think that kind of kicked off this discussion, so appreciate the opportunity to be here. What I want to do, as Mayor Nation mentioned, I'm the Executive Director of the Illinois River Watershed Partnership. We're a watershed-wide organization, and what I want to do is just talk a little bit about the watershed and what's happening in the watershed, and also about some of the programs we're implementing to improve water quality and watershed management. So our mission is to improve the integrity of the Illinois River watershed through public education, community outreach, and implementation of conservation and restoration practices throughout the watershed in Arkansas and Oklahoma. We do this, we're very fortunate to be led by a board of directors that is large and diverse. We've got 21 members of the board, so if you think this is a diverse and large board, certainly ours is the same. We've got business and agriculture, conservation, construction, technical research and education, and government members on our board. And what that really allows us to do is come up with consensus-based solutions to improve water quality and manage the watershed more effectively. And you'll recognize some of the names of the various organizations that sit on our board of directors. So at RWP, we have a few key messages. We want to proactively conserve and restore natural areas in ways that reduce risk, improves water quality, and preserves our heritage in Northwest Arkansas and the region. We want to offer a toolbox of voluntary, and I emphasize voluntary because we're not a regulatory organization in any way. We don't get involved in regulatory issues. We offer voluntary water quality management solutions to landowners. So that's the emphasis of what we do. We also connect urban and rural landowners to technical and financial assistance. We find solutions that fit short-term and long-term needs of landowners while protecting water quality. And finally, we often emphasize the message that everyone has a personal responsibility to improve and water quality and manage the watershed. And so we really emphasize that personal responsibility, the actions that each one of us do in the city of Siloam Springs and throughout the watershed really make a combined difference that really improves water quality in the watershed, and we can do it together is our message. It's a complex watershed. It starts down near Hawkeye, Arkansas, if you're familiar, in Washington County. It goes northwest around the Weddington Woods. It crosses over here just south of Siloam Springs, of course, as you're aware, is the drinking water source for the city of Siloam, and then also the drinking water resource for Tahlequah, Oklahoma, as well as other smaller intakes. It empties into Lake Tenkiller and ultimately flows back across the state of Arkansas through the Arkansas River below Lake Tenkiller. The largest cities in northwest Arkansas get their drinking water from Beaver Lake watershed, and the majority of that water ends up in the Illinois River watershed as wastewater treatment plant effluent, as you may be aware. So it's kind of a unique interbasin transfer between the two watersheds. Our headwaters in northwest Arkansas are rapidly urbanizing, as I think you're very well aware, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how they're urbanizing. The 2020 census showed that Benton and Washington counties are increasing in population, or increased in population, 28% and 21% respectively between 2010 and 2020. We're going to, if projections hold, we're going to reach 1 million people, up from 530,000 currently in those two counties. We're going to reach 1 million people by 2045, or just under. What that means is half of the wastewater treatment plant capacity and infrastructure that we're going to need in our region is either not yet online or it has yet to be built. Same with drinking water capacity, same with streets, roads, housing, things that I know you all are very focused on and working towards. So we've got a lot of work to do in addition to protecting water quality, which is our primary mission. Land cover is changing rapidly, as I mentioned. By 2050, 58% of the watershed is going to be an urban planning area. It's going to be mostly medium density development, most likely, if the current trajectory kind of holds true. And it's going to continue to be an important agricultural area, but that is changing. And the land use and land cover in Northwest Arkansas is changing. But as you all know, Benton and Washington counties, I think, lead the state actually in beef production, and poultry production obviously is a big economic driver as well. So looking forward, land cover and land use as we've known is going to be changing, certainly. From the perspective of water quality, many of the streams in the Illinois River watershed don't meet the designated use thresholds. What that means is they are impaired for contaminants such as E. coli, bacteria of other kinds, dissolved oxygen, phosphorus as well. And so we work every day to improve that, as I know you all do here in the city of Siloam Springs as well, and to get those impaired waterways off of the 303D of the Clean Water Act list, as it's known. Just in terms of water quality, one of the indicators is the Ozark blind cavefish. This is the cave at our 28-acre sanctuary in Cave Springs, Arkansas, since 2020, and even actually since 2000, excuse me. And before that, even U.S. Fish and Wildlife has been doing surveys looking at populations of this endemic, as it's called, species, which means it's limited to a very narrow, small geographic region in Benton and Washington County, and outside in Missouri a little bit, but very limited. And those populations are consistently declining over time, which is indicative that we really need to be paying attention to what is happening in our watershed, because if species that are very sensitive, like the Ozark blind cavefish, are having some trouble, what does that indicate for us and our water quality that we use as drinking water ultimately as well? It's something to keep in mind. I want to talk a little bit about stream bank erosion, because it's probably one of the biggest challenges that we face right now in the watershed. And from my perspective anyway, I'll just speak from that perspective. We've monitored 15 stream bank erosion sites, including here on Sager Creek, since 2017. This is a site at Muddy Fork out by Lincoln. This stream bank site is losing 3.3 feet per year of stream bank. That's all that nutrients, all that land, productive land for this farmer, headed downstream, ultimately ending up in the Illinois River watershed and in our drinking water here in Siloam as well. This is just a cross section. You can see that year over year kind of marching into that farmer's field, loss in productive land. That's a top-down view of it. This is another site near Clear Creek, 11.5 feet per year being lost at this site. You can see there's no riparian vegetation along there. You can see the creek is kind of just shifting over into the pasture there, unfortunately. This is a cross section of it. You can see how that's changing over time, and a top-down view of that site as well. So we did this at 15 sites. Why is it important, you might be asking? Well, it's loss of productive lands, as I mentioned, and on average throughout the watershed, we're losing about 1 foot per year, or 20 acres of productive land. This is introducing 102,000 tons of sediment into the Illinois River watershed, which is a pollutant effectively and contaminant certainly for drinking water downstream. This sediment nutrient loading is contributing 154,000 pounds of phosphorus to the watershed annually. It's expensive to treat it. It impacts fish and wildlife, and makes it difficult for us in Arkansas to meet the Oklahoma standard of 0.037 milligrams per liter that has been set at the state line. It's also a safety hazard to people and livestock. So what is causing it? And I think this is probably what you're more, hopefully, I believe, more interested in. There's many causes of stream bank erosion, but they're symptomatic of the stream bank erosion is symptomatic of multiple diseases, let's call it. One of them is precipitation. On average, this is a graph from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They're expanding this study, and we'll be going into even more depth with it. But it shows a significant trend, a fairly consistent wavy pattern all the way back to 1890. And then in the last 10 years, a significant uptrend in precipitation in the Illinois River watershed in northwest Arkansas. It's on average 10.5 inches over the historical average. So what you're hearing or what you're seeing when you see floodwaters is not, you're not wrong. There is a change in precipitation in northwest Arkansas, and that's what this graphic represents, particularly between 2010 and 2020. Increasing stream flow is as a result of increasing precipitation in part, is also changing. This is a graph from the U.S. Geological Survey gauge at Elm Springs, just up the road from our office in Cave Springs, and you can see a pretty consistent trend upward in stream flow over time. This is a hydrograph, and another driver of stream bank erosion is higher runoff rates and sustained flow. And what this hydrograph shows is that really nice bell shape that you see in the dotted line is a normal flood event. It's fairly uniform in terms of the increase in discharge over time, and then a peak and decrease. When we introduce impervious surface with detention practices, what we see is a change in that hydrograph, and that's what's represented in the gray. You have a much steeper increase in flow at the very beginning, pretty much similar peak flow, peak discharge, and then a much longer and sustained discharge over time from impervious surface with detention practices, development with detention. And so what that does is it increases velocity and shear stress ultimately on stream banks, which increases stream bank erosion. Construction in the floodplain, a real challenge, quite frankly, in the watershed. This is in Benton County. That's the 100-year floodplain that you're seeing there. You can see all the parcels, and if you look through the yellow tint, you can see houses being built. I'm going to come back to those structures in time, but what we're doing is we're building in the floodplain, and if we really want to address increasing precipitation, which means more volume coming through the Illinois River watershed, it's got to spread out. And the more we build in the watershed, the more challenging it's going to be for that water to spread out. And we're going to lose infrastructure, and we're going to increasingly constrict the stream channel to where it really doesn't have any choice but to just blow out stream banks and infrastructure that we install. Debris jams are another cause of stream bank erosion. Gravel deposits from upstream bank erosion. Deforestation of the riparian corridor. This is a significant challenge that I see. We get a lot of calls from landowners who say, will you come out and look at my stream bank? And this is what it looks like frequently. And they say, it's something upstream. Well, it is, you're right, but it's also management practices on site and ensuring that you have good deep-rooted vegetation, the cement that effectively holds that bank together over time, the rebar, I should say, is probably a better description, plus some cement, holds that bank over time in place. And that is that land management practice really is challenging to stabilizing stream banks and ensuring and reducing stream bank erosion over time. Past attempts at altering. This is a landowner out here in Benton County, actually. They built a levee in order to keep this is Osage Creek, actually it's Little Osage, in the channel. And what's happening is, it's kind of working. They're keeping a lot of the flood water in for the time being, but it's increasing the velocity and sending that water down to the next landowner to knock out the next bank. And ultimately it's going to fail. This levee is probably going to fail most likely as well. The creek is going to say, nope, there's too much water coming through this system. I'm going to go around you and I'm going to cut back behind it. And so it's not really going to work. So we need to work on land practices that address these causes of stream bank erosion. This is back to that 100-year floodplain. These structures are being built in the 100-year floodplain. They're on anywhere from 3 to about 7 feet of red fill dirt. And they become moats around during flood. There's a moat around these structures. And so these are $1 million houses that are being built in the floodplain. I want to just give you a quick example. 264, I think many of you have driven it. You turn out of Cave Springs, headed towards Highfill or towards the airport. This is right as you leave Cave Springs, on the left side, you'll see a big field, and there's this bridge crossing over Osage Creek. And I've been looking at this bridge since 1998 or thereabouts, when the airport was built, and I started going through there. And it has changed dramatically since I was a teenager at the time. But what you can see in the photo is a fairly stable stream channel. Doesn't look like it's moving a whole lot. The field is intact on both sides. We're going to go forward in time, and I want you to see the transition over time. Jump forward 10 years. you start to see that stream channel trying to spread out and deposit gravel. It's cutting a little bit more deeply in certain places, but depositing gravel. It looks like they're doing some stream bank stabilization in the image. This is below, towards the bottom of the image that you're seeing here. And so it's something's starting to change. What is that? It's downstream of major developed areas that are growing very rapidly in Northwest Arkansas. And I'm not saying development is a bad thing, it's a great thing, but there are downstream consequences to it that we need to manage for. And then jump forward to March 2014, you start to see that channel kind of again continuing to spread out, trying to absorb the energy from that upstream velocity and volume that is coming down through this system. It's depositing gravel, it's digging some pretty deep, those darker holes are where it's digging gravel out, and then it's depositing on gravel bars. It's cutting in even more into this farmer's field. Jump forward to 2016, you can see basically all the riparian area through there is gone. You've got a lot of gravel, acres of gravel that are being deposited on productive land on farm fields, which is very unfortunate, and can be managed. They're replacing the bridge in this. And then 2020, you can see how far we've come in terms of just that stream channel trying to correct and manage for upstream changes in the watershed over time, as well as things like precipitation, as I discussed earlier. So that's 96. Oh, and that's, well, I can't go back, so I'm not, without messing it up, most likely. There we go. So I want to talk about total phosphorus because I think all of you are aware of this. Total phosphorus in the watershed has steadily been dropping due to the implementation of best management practices around everything from litter application to erosion management and the efforts of this city and others at construction sites, non-point source pollutants or runoff in many cases. We still have a lot of work to do. We're not at the 0.037 milligrams per liter target that has been set by the state of Oklahoma, but we're actively working towards achieving that goal. But I think the message I want to leave you with on this is that we're making steady progress, and we can if we work together to really address water quality in Northwest Arkansas. So what is IRWP doing? I want to just briefly mention some of the programs. Some of them you're going to be familiar with. One of them is our Blue Cities, Blue Neighborhoods program, which is funded by the Walton Family Foundation, and also the funding comes from our sponsors as well. Through our Blue Cities program, Morgan Keeling coordinates our program, our Blue Cities, Blue Neighborhoods program. We will work with cities to speak to city boards like this, as well as planning commissions, and work with staff to integrate best management practices and conduct field tours and educational opportunities. And so that work is continuing. Through our Blue Neighborhoods program, we can really get into the neighborhoods and develop what we call a master plan for green infrastructure. Morgan just led a neighborhood meeting on Sunday with Cross Creek and Rogers, which helped them think through what would we like to do in terms of replanting riparian vegetated areas, maybe retrofitting detention ponds with better with vegetation, as well as bioremediation through improving soils, getting rid of maybe hard-packed red clay that really doesn't have any infiltration of nutrients. As I think many of you know, detention facilities they work for flood management. They don't really work for nutrients. And so how can you improve their nutrient retention capacity? And so we can provide technical assistance with partners to help neighborhoods, POAs, HOAs understand what their options are and how they can use their HOA dollars towards retrofitting or improving through things like as simple as rain gardens and other best management practices. We also implement the septic tank remediation program. This program provides up to $30,000 to repair or replace, and we've had great uptake in Siloam Springs, but I encourage you to share this program. Again, Morgan manages this program. She wears many hats, but we provide grant dollars or zero interest loan. There's no cap on income, but people with lower income can get more grant dollars as opposed to zero interest loan. And with higher incomes, you get a more zero interest loan. So in the last 16 months, we've implemented 38 projects, and that's approximately, just in the city of Siloam, $98,000 for 7 projects in that time frame. So Siloam has been great in terms of utilizing the program. I'm not going to go into the riparian restoration program. I think you all are very familiar with it. I think it's you've had projects come before the board before, including the Bob Henry Park and the kayak park. But I really appreciate the partnership with the city and the board on these types of projects. We really couldn't do these projects without your support. And they make really significant differences in water quality through implementation of some of the best management practices that you see here for both urban and rural areas. And we hope by the end of, in the next 2 years, we'll have 20 miles of restored riparian area or protected riparian area. These are just some of the program achievements, just to say that we also work outside of urban areas quite a bit with this program. We've developed 48 landowner conservation plans that have tailored practices that farmers and landowners can utilize on their farm, and those cover over 2,000 acres of productive lands. We also implement our youth education program, bring field trips to our learning center in Cave Springs. It's both indoors and outdoors. We offer curriculum material that is integrated into next generation standards and state standards as well. And they include things like watershed pollution, bioindexing of macroinvertebrates, watershed exploration, and other water quality learning lessons. We also take that into the classroom. We've been to the city of Siloam schools several times, bringing that into the classroom and educating students here in Siloam Springs. Today, or just this spring, during the spring term, we reached in the classroom and at our learning center in Cave Springs over 1,700 students with water quality and watershed management curriculum. Our goal is 3,000 students this year, and we're going to surpass that goal. So I'm really proud of this work and really appreciate the city, the schools throughout the region that are participating in it. You can see as part of that, we also have the chance to really bring students out into the watershed, do what we call our ecological assessment of the watershed, which rotates between Arkansas and Oklahoma segments of the watershed. And we can bring, for example, schools throughout the region to conduct macroinvertebrate surveys and do sampling. It's a really hands-on way to get them involved in water quality monitoring. And you can see Main Street Academy has been very involved this year in our work on Sager Creek in terms of assessing macroinvertebrates and collecting water samples from Sager Creek. We implement the Unpaved Roads program, which focuses on reducing sediment that's going into the Illinois River watershed. And this is in collaboration with Benton County Roads Department. And we led a training back in May with Benton County Roads Department for 12 county roads managers from 12 counties throughout Arkansas, where we could show, practices that really work, that reduce cost to roads departments and improve water quality, reduce erosion and loss of. We've all been on some of the rural roads here in the county, and after a major flood, they're washed out. And so our practices really focus on how to stabilize those roads, reduce that loss of sediment, and reduce cost to roads departments. And so this training was back in May. We do a lot of outreach. These are just some examples. We had a busy spring and summer. We did a vegetation management training with your Parks and Recreation, Parks and Recreation staff, I think, as well as other staff here at the city. A lot of field tours and other things, best management practices and things like impervious pavement as well. So. I think I'm just going to conclude by saying we are really fortunate to have financial sponsors from throughout the region: the Walton Family Foundation, Arkansas Natural Resources Division, American Electric Power Foundation, and others. We really value the support from counties and local government as well. Several cities in northwest Arkansas and Tahlequah in Oklahoma are financial sponsors. We couldn't do this work without the support of you all in terms of your contributions through projects, but also direct financial support from all of our sponsors. So with that, I'll stop, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. I think I was pretty close to 20 minutes, I hope.
Thank you, Leif. So, directors, we have about 5 minutes. So if you do have questions, I'll ask that you keep them rather brief. So anyone have a question for Leif at this time? David?
Macroinvertebrates, is that crawfish, crawdads?
Yes.
Okay.
And others.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that's what I figured it was. At least 15 years plus. She's now our state representative, but Delia Hawk has been really keeping the city involved and up to date on what's been going on. And really, first time I'd ever heard of it was thanks to Delia. And so she's been invaluable to this area for the IRWP. Yep. Thank you, Leif.
Thank you, David. Anyone else? Lisa?
I want to say thank you for coming. When I went to your presentation, it was because Brad suggested that we go, and I'm glad I did. One of the things, the reason I even went is because I have a lot of citizens in the area I live that the creek runs through, and and Philip's been out there, we've had problems. Do we recommend them to you? I mean, do we have them come talk to you, or, because a lot of them are in the county, and we can't help them. Is that what you...
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. We can go out and visit landowners. Through our landowner services program, we can go out and provide recommendations, come up with a conservation plan, as I mentioned, for that landowner. It depends really on what their challenge is. Sometimes it's flooding, sometimes it's erosion, and we may or may not be able to provide financial assistance as well through one of our programs, but we can definitely provide technical assistance and try to connect them with other sources of financial assistance, if not ourselves as well. So absolutely, anytime, you're welcome to refer them to us. We'll do our best to help them.
And after I went through your presentation, we are approving a lot of development in not just Siloam, Northwest Arkansas. What can we do? What do you suggest that we look at as we make suggestions or approvals or voting on that? What is the things that you suggest we look at the most? Because I know erosion is one problem we have in our area, in my side of town, but and then our banks here in Sanger Creek.
Yeah, I mean, I am not an urban planning expert, I'll be very honest, so I don't want to get too far out of my depth, but I think I mentioned some of the challenges that we're facing. Impervious surface, whatever you can do to decrease impervious surface and improve infiltration. Detention is obviously very important if you don't want to put all that volume and velocity into whatever's downstream of you. I think, certainly floodplain development is really challenging, and it might seem okay on site, but it's nothing but bad news downstream, certainly in the long run. And I think in many cases for local infrastructure, even near those developments. And I got a call today from a small city, Johnson, Arkansas, and they are having flooding in a fairly new apartment complex that wasn't there even 5 years ago, and they can't figure out where it's coming from, but it's probably coming from impervious surface that was not sufficiently designed. Adequately meets the standards, yes, but I think when you look at those precipitation trends that I shared with you, we can't continue business as usual. I mean, what that says is we better be thinking forward and planning for this. And so if you're interested in specific, like what could you do, I think I want to consult with some of my experts and give you some specific recommendations on that in terms of what you all could really prioritize and as you review those plans.
I know a lot, we look at, and I know we're cutting time, Philip and I have looked at a lot of detention ponds. Well, I don't even know the difference between retention and detention. Detention ponds and how they function, and I think that's what I probably need to get more educated on. Because we require them when we build.
So, if I may, as Leif said, detention ponds are important because you can't just let all of that new volume, run off from that, right? And the law sort of says we have to retain it or detain it, and let the same amount of water, cubic feet per second flow off that historically has flown off. Historically, it's flown off in sheet flow, right? And after development comes out of a detention pond, it's concentrated, and that causes some problems downstream maybe. But it's not a, I wish there was a, and Leaf, I wanted you to say one answer to say this will solve all the problems. It's multitude of techniques and solutions to try to get to that solution, right? And part of it is impervious surface and trying to find that ways to do that. I think detention ponds work very well, but as Leaf stated in his presentation, they don't necessarily, just a standard detention pond doesn't do a good job of dealing with the water quality and the sediments and all that. There are some techniques that we're trying to do, allowing the Justin, help me out, the green stuff to grow.
Vegetation.
Yeah, there's the term I'm looking for. Thank you. The vegetation to grow in some of that, and that slows some of the water down, gives it opportunity to let some of those factors drop. But that kind of also creates other problems because people don't like to see detention ponds that appear not to be maintained and mowed. And if you let too much of it grow up, it takes up capacity of the detention pond. And then you have more water that you need to retain. So I wish there was a easy solution. I have asked staff, and Justin can speak to this if you'd like, to start looking at updates to our drainage manual and try to get beyond some of the things. Leaf, you mentioned, and I wrote it down, and I didn't know if I heard it correctly, but on average we're seeing 10.5 more inches of annual rainfall.
Mm-hmm.
So detention ponds, stormwater drainage pipes, they're all sized based on an engineering calculation that's based on historic rainfall from decades ago. And that historic rainfall is not the rainfall that we're seeing today. And so, you know, if we're basing everything on 100-year storms, we may have to start saying we need to base it on a 125-year storm, but that's not in the engineer's manual. So Justin is working on some of those designs, and hopefully, I can't promise it'll happen this year, but hopefully in 2023 we'll come back with some improvements to some of those storm drainage patterns. I'm sorry I took up more time than you probably wanted.
Sorry. Yeah, and I think we are over our time. So Leaf, thank you very much for your information tonight and for presenting to the board. We look forward to you working with our staff. I know that you are already doing that, and we appreciate that very much. So again, thank you, and Morgan, for being here.
Thank you.
And this workshop is adjourned. We will take about a 2-minute break, and then we will re-adjourn for our board meeting. No, we're fine. Call to order this regular meeting of the Siloam Springs Board of Directors, September 2022. Roll call.
Sappington.
Here.
Smiley.
Here.
Burns.
Here.
Hunt. Rissler.
Here.
Allen.
Here.
Carroll.
Here.
At this time, if you all will please stand with me, Director Carroll will lead us in a word of prayer, and please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let's pray. Father, tonight we have opportunity to give thanks to you for yet another beautiful day as we look forward to the fall season. We can also look forward to what's going on with our families, with our community. And we as the Board of Directors, Father, we're looking to you tonight for wisdom, making wise decisions, doing what you called us to do, being the people you called us to be. We thank you for opportunity to be in your service. In Jesus' name, amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. At this time, I would like to ask anyone that has an electronic device to please silence that. And thank you. Also, before we get into our public input, there is an item on our agenda under presentations by Mr. Curt Smith from the Siloam Springs Country Club Golf Course. That presentation has been canceled for tonight. It will possibly be on our October 4th agenda meeting, but it will not be addressed tonight. So just want to let everyone know that before we get into the agenda. So at this time, it is time for the public input. If there is anyone here that would like to address the board on any item that is not on our regular agenda, you may come to the podium and you will have 3 minutes to speak. Is there anyone here? Yes, sir.
My name is Jerry Covenus. I live at 2307 West Granite here in Siloam Springs. Madam Mayor, City Administrator, and Directors, thank you for this few minutes. Tonight, I want to speak to you as the new commander for American Legion Post 29 in Siloam Springs. And I'm here to express our gratitude to the city of Siloam Springs for the working relationship that we have with the city at our American Legion and down at the American Legion Community Hall and our American Legion meeting room in the basement. Recently, a new floor was put down in the American Legion meeting area of our basement, which really enhanced where we meet, and it is so nice because old carpet was taken up over a period of time. There was some flooding at different times, and the carpet and everything would get be really bad condition. We were worried about maybe some things not being good for the health for our members. And the city did an outstanding job of going in, taking all that out, sanding the floors and putting down new flooring that can now be waterproof and can be cleaned properly. So you have my gratitude as commander, and I speak on behalf of the post when I say thank you for that. The flag program that we enjoy working with the city on, new flags were placed all along 412 this past Sunday, and I will want to thank the post members that did that and the city for letting us have that responsibility, and a special thanks to our police department helping us because we have folks on ladders and trying to do that along the highway is extremely difficult. I want to also let you know that over the past few weeks we have made donations to local nonprofits in excess of $5,000, and includes donations to Ability Tree, Genesis House, Manna Center, Adult Development Center, Sheepdog, Northwest Arkansas Children's Shelter, and the Boy and Cub Scouts in our area. The last thing I want to bring your attention and ask you to participate in is something that we are able to make these donations because of fundraisers we have, and the one coming up this Saturday morning is our Veteran Day sausage and pancake and silent auction fundraiser, and that starts at 7 o'clock down at the community building and runs till 11 o'clock. And there are well over 100 items for silent auction. And just one example is Lazy Boy gave us a couch, and we have just so many things there. And I would be remiss if I didn't also tell you that we have in the works a Veterans Day parade on November the 5th. And I was just sharing that with the police chief, and we will have the everything in with our application and the direction and the way that's going to go. And we're looking for support throughout the city, and especially with our city leaders here. And thank you for the time.
Thank you, Jerry. Is there anyone else?
Good evening.
Good
My
evening.
name is James McGuirk. I live at 412 West University Street in Siloam. I'm a little bit stunned that the city would consider selling in the assets that belongs to the city and the taxpayers for such a small amount, and I'm talking about the Lake Francis property. I don't believe that the price that they're offering is a fair amount. I believe that the board needs to get outside legal opinion to see if this is not a violation of state law of selling the citizens-owned assets. I know the city has owned this property for decades, and I don't understand why we're kind of rushing into this whole thing. I don't understand that at all, and I would like somebody to explain that to me if they could. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else? If not, is there anyone that would like to address the board concerning any item that is on our consent agenda? If there is not, then we will go on with our agenda, which is the consent agenda. Item A, workshop minutes, September 6, 2022. B, regular meeting minutes, September 6th, 2022. Item C, dedication of utility easements, 100 block of South Oak Hill Street. Item D, granting slope and grading easement, 1550 Cheri Whitlock Drive. Directors, that is our consent agenda. Is there anything that you would like to have pulled? If not, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Smiley,
Yes.
Yes.
Burns, Rissler,
Yes.
Allen,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
Sappington.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Next, we will move on to our staff reports, since we do not have any ordinances or resolutions on our agenda this evening. First will be the discussion of the fireworks ordinance, and I believe, Chief Kreiner, you are going to do that for us.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Mayor and Board. Jeremy Kreiner, Fire Chief. So after the latest Independence Day holiday, there were several discussions at the board meeting on July the 5th for most of the directors related to concerns regarding our current fireworks ordinance. And there was some direction from the board that they wanted to revisit that ordinance. And so I've given you a copy of the current code section based on that ordinance that was approved in 2019. And so really there's several options that, in moving forward, we felt like the board should provide some guidance into how they want to proceed with that. Currently, the ordinance allows fireworks to be shot off July the 1st through the 3rd from noon until 10 p.m. and then on July the 4th from noon until midnight. Some of the ideas that were thrown out there give us a wide range of options. And so the discussion tonight is, Do we do nothing? Do we repeal the ordinance in its entirety, or do we come up with other solutions? Some of the ideas thrown out were limiting the number of days, reducing the hours, things like that. The ordinance already addresses several of the other concerns, trash being left out there. The ordinance does require individuals to pick up after themselves for that. They're not allowed to shoot off fireworks on other people's property without permission. They're not allowed to shoot them off on public property within a certain amount of distance from gas stations, filling stations, fireworks stands, assisted living facilities, and the like. So with that, I would just ask the board, what would you like us to proceed with this? And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Chief. First, is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to this ordinance? If there is not, directors. And Lisa?
Madam Mayor.
Sorry, Lisa had asked, so yes, Lisa.
So initially, I think this was brought about because they thought the phone calls at the PD would slow down. Has that been the case? Has the calls slowed down? Did it serve its purpose?
And Chief can go into further detail if you'd like, but my understanding is yes, their calls for service related to fireworks have dropped consistently year to year.
Thank you. Carol?
I'm one of them that asked to review this. And thank you for including the ordinance in here, because as I'm looking through here, I think it's very reasonable. I think the times are appropriate. So as I look at this, I really don't think we need to do any changes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Anyone else?
Mayor.
Yes, Marla.
Chief Kreiner, I agree with the ordinance. I think it's fine. I think there might be one part where it says not to shoot off on public property that, the residents are using the streets. So are we going to say don't shoot them off in the streets, set them off on your own property, or what are we going to do?
My understanding is that would be how it is interpreted, is that streets would fall into public property.
All right, thank you. And I sold fireworks for almost 20 years, and so they don't bother me, and I think you did a wonderful job of putting the ordinance together.
Anyone else?
Mayor?
Yes, David.
I'm going to be the devil's advocate and say that I also asked for this to be reviewed because I'm the only board member here that was not on the board in 2019 to vote on this. I honestly disagree that we've had a decrease in firework-related, maybe incidents, but certainly not in calls, because we have a lot of people call the police and get nothing done, because by the time the police get there, there's nothing to report. The people shooting the fireworks have gone. I think that we need to change the times. I honestly don't know how this entire ordinance can be followed. I think there's some things in here that are kind of ridiculous. The number 4, saying that we can have extraordinary events sponsored by government, education, religious, civic, et cetera, between 12 p.m. and 12 a.m. And they have to fill out an application. Why would any organization want to be able to shoot off fireworks up until midnight? That doesn't make any sense. This has gone on before. It keeps people awake. People that have gone to sleep are suddenly woken and very upset. I've gotten calls, I've gotten emails about it. And for the actual ordinance to say it's the responsibility of the applicant to demonstrate the time and location of the display will not unreasonably annoy, disturb, or otherwise harm occupants. How is anybody supposed to do that? How's anybody supposed to demonstrate that their display of fireworks in the middle of town up until 12 a.m. is not going to annoy or disturb anyone? I think that's kind of a ridiculous statement. In event that the fireworks are prohibited, number 6, due to hazardous conditions, no citizen can legally discharge them, then we're going to allow the city administrator, the fire chief, to come up with an alternate date other than July 1st through the July 4th. If there's hazardous conditions such as a burn ban or whatever, what are we going to have them in August celebrating July 4th? That paragraph doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But doing them within, or not doing them within 100 feet of public park or city property, within 1,000 feet of a hospital, nursing, or assisted living facility, or any facility for the boarding and keeping of dogs, cannot be discharged within 300 feet of a gas station or propane station. Who's regulating this? No one's checking into any of this stuff. I mean, fireworks are going off all over town during these 4 days, and there's nobody going out and saying, oh, you're within 1,000 feet of a hospital or wherever. So I think the dates should be changed. I think the dates, I think July 1st through July 3rd until 10 p.m. is too many days. And I think July 4th, why do we have it end on midnight, but on December 31st, we have it only for an hour? So there's a lot of things that are kind of odd to me on the entire thing. But as I said, I was the only one who didn't have a say on it, so now I'm giving my input. The exception of any aerial fireworks such as a bottle rocket, how does anybody regulate that? They don't. And in number 8, the discharge of fireworks from a motor vehicle is not in the appropriate paragraph because it has to do with transportation, and it's in the paragraph regarding cleanup. I can assure you, the people, at least the young people that go and do them in the streets, do not clean up the fireworks. They are out in the streets the very next day after July 4th. And that to me is a serious problem, and it's not gone any different. I don't like having fireworks in the city. I don't think the impact of tax revenue should even be considered. And I just don't believe that the risk is worth what we did by bringing this into the city statutes.
Thank you, David. Is there anyone else?
Madam Mayor.
Yes, Lisa.
So I asked a lot of people what they thought, and I had probably close to 200 answers, if not more. And most of the people...
Lisa, can you speak up? I can't hear you.
Most of the people that responded or talked to me, they didn't like fireworks in city limits, but they understood why we did fireworks in city limits, which, so they wanted to keep it. They just wanted to reduce the hours and the number of days. And so that was the biggest response I got is, yeah, I don't want it, but if we're going to do it, and I understand why we're doing it, let's look at the hours and let's look at the days. And so that's where I stand is I agree, keep it, but let's look at the hours and let's look at the days.
Thank you, Lisa. Anyone else?
Madam Mayor.
Yes, Brad.
I was on the board, and I stated the last when this was brought up, I don't buy fireworks, I don't shoot off fireworks. But what brought it up is it's basically a non-enforceable. PD does not have the staff to address everything that happens during these holiday hours. It's impossible. And so Jeff Lewis, when he was here, he gave a presentation. And, you know, for me, I've got barking dogs across the street from me that annoy me more than fireworks do. That's just me. So my neighborhood, as an example, has a little fun on these holidays, and they've been having that kind of fun. And I've lived in the house for 19 years, so they've been having fun for 19 years, and they've been illegal, and they're still having fun. And PD makes their rounds, and they disappear. It is a tough one. And I think there's an age gap difference. We all celebrate holidays differently. And it's just, it makes it complicated. And I agree. You can put hours on this. I debated with Director Hunt on that. We could change this ordinance upside down and try to make the board happy that the folks they're representing. But at the end of the day, people in this town are shooting off fireworks. So how do we manage that? And obviously there's no simple solution. But the fact is, it is a non-enforceable, and it's a difficult task for PD when they receive 20 calls. The dispatcher's taking 20 calls, and you've got X number of people on the streets, and by the time they get to that house, everybody's disappeared. And then the neighbor over on the other block wanted to know why you didn't go to their call. And I think that the PD stated some of their frustrations that they had in the past. So I'm going to represent Mindy Hunt tonight and remain neutral on this one because it's just a difficult one. It's difficult. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Anyone else?
Madam Mayor.
Reed.
Chief, I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. We're sitting here discussing it, and you're the expert, and Chief Gilbert, you are the ones that get to see this, the reality of it, and implement whatever's been done. I'm sure you've seen some of these in other communities. How does this stack up to it? Do we have a bunch of malarkey with it, or is this something that we can actually work with?
I was this close to getting out of giving my opinion, so thank you for that, Director Carroll. No, I appreciate the question. When we originally were tasked with putting together an ordinance, we did go out and look at other cities and what was being modeled throughout the region, throughout the state. And so the ordinance itself does fall in line with communities that allow fireworks. It is very similar in structure, a set amount of days, restrictions on bottle rockets and things that fly on a stick. So there's a lot of very similarities with that. As the numbers that I put together in my staff presentation state, we've not seen an uptick in the number of fireworks related incidents. Prior to fireworks being legal in the state or in the city, we also ran similar amounts of calls. So we've not seen a huge increase in that from a response perspective. So I would be willing to put forth any solution that you guys would prefer. From the fire chief's perspective, I don't have an issue with the current ordinance in place as it is today.
Yeah, well, I think I've heard somewhere the first rule of government is protect the people. Do you feel like this protects the people, and or is there some more scrutiny we need to step into?
Fireworks are inherently risky, and everything that we do, and I relate this story oftentimes as the fire chief, responding to any emergency incident has an inherent level of risk. What we try to do day in and day out is how do we mitigate that risk? And so what we attempted to do with this ordinance was how did we lessen the risk for fireworks that are already being displayed and put off here in the city, and that's to put some guidelines in place to allow them to follow them safely. So I felt like we've attempted to do that with the current ordinance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor.
Thank you, Reed. Yes, Marla.
I just want to add in that the class of fireworks that are available to the public are not ones that are going to hurt where they end up. They are loud, but if someone gets injured from them, it's a lot more apt to be the person that is shooting it off, from misuse and not following proper guidelines or trying to do what they shouldn't do with them. And I know that, it bothers the dogs and stuff, but if we, I think the guidelines are good. I think that 4 days, we celebrate from the 1st to the 4th. We don't know when it's going to be on a weekend. It may be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Not everybody gets off on the same day to celebrate. And I think that we need to, enable the public to be able, to participate in that. And when we initially started this, it was because it's causing a lot of problem for the police and fire to go out on calls that are just nuisance calls where there's no danger. And if then a danger come up, they weren't able to go to the call because they were taking care of a nuisance call. So we've got guidelines, we've got parameters. You know, we can keep it boxed in and know that those 4 days are the days we need to concentrate on. If we need to put extra patrol on, we can. If we need to have extra, you know, fire and ambulance ready, we do. But we finally got the guidelines for it. And we've only seen it work one season. And, you know, I think it's going to take time. And like I said, the class of fireworks that we are able to get as individual are not things that are going to do damage to property or anything. And I scrape them out of my swimming pool every year, and I love fireworks, but I don't like doing that. But it's not enough for me to tell my neighbors, you know, don't do this, or for me to call the police and complain because I've got some paper in my pool.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marla.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, David.
Marla, I will respectfully disagree with you. The class of fireworks that can be bought at any fireworks stand in or outside the city limits can include bottle rockets, can include rockets, can include the large, very large, giant-sized bottle rockets that are not supposed to be shot in the city limits. Doesn't mean they're not, and they are. The number one job of any government agency, I've always felt, is the safety of its citizens and taxpayers. And all it takes is one sparking rocket, bottle rocket, whatever, landing on a shake shingle roof to catch that house on fire, could possibly kill or harm the individuals, much less, you know, travel to other homes. And not to say that's not, you know, going to be put out by our fire department, but is it worth the risk of safety of property and people being hurt, harmed, or killed simply because we wanted to abide by the squeaky wheel getting the grease of those who want fireworks in the city? When I was a kid, we went outside the city limits and did them. And I don't see what's the big deal that we have to have them within the city limits. If we do, we ought to be having them much tighter, the 3rd and 4th at max. People are going to shoot fireworks on the 4th of July, whether it's a Wednesday or whether it's a Saturday. And so the other thing I believe on the ordinance as is, the timing involved for any outside organization to be able to do them till midnight, I'm surprised that got through, because there are a lot of elderly people who go to bed early and do not like being woke up. I don't like being woke up at 1 a.m. or 12 p.m., 12 a.m. But it's one of those things where when you get enough people griping about it, and then all of a sudden we also have something where it's not just during the holidays, it's when a local organization decides to do it to celebrate. And people don't appreciate that. I think the chief just said it. It's inherently dangerous dealing with fireworks, and there's going to be ramifications. It may not happen this year, next year, or 10 years from now. But this is the 3rd year that we've had this ordinance in effect, and I've heard worse things every single year from people who get tired of the cleanup to people who call me or email me and say, why do we even have this, in that I'm asleep at 10 o'clock and suddenly woke up because the neighbors down the street decided to shoot off rockets. So I just think the risk, the inherent risk and the risk of anyone's home or person being harmed is not worth this ordinance being in effect as long as it is and until the times that it is.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Carol.
Chief, can you tell me how many incidents we've had involving fire from fireworks in 1 year?
This year, I believe, was, I don't have the exact numbers, but it was less than 5 fires related. And understand sometimes it's hard to determine the exact cause, right? If we respond to a dumpster fire and there's firework shrapnel in there, there's also cigarette butt shrapnel in there and other things that may have caused that. If in this time frame, we typically classify those as firework related. So grass fires, we had one incident, I believe, this year of that, but less than 5 this year. And every year is somewhat similar to that.
Did we make any EMS runs because of injuries?
Not that I'm aware of.
Madam Mayor,
Thank you. Yes, David.
as I said a moment ago, it just takes one time that a roof gets caught on fire. And if we're going to look at the historical of what's happened before to make the determination that, oh, we're fine, it's never going to happen because it's not happened before, that's very short-sighted. It's not looking at the safety of our citizens to say, well, it's not happened, so why should we think it will happen in the future? All it takes is one home, and I'm not going to be quiet about one home getting burnt or somebody hurt because we didn't think it would happen.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Brad.
Could I get Chief Gilbert? Could you mind coming up and I think kind of on the PD side, did you guys have any incidents that were outside fire? Don't cheat.
Yeah, I have to look at my notes. Alan Gilbert, Chief of Police, Siloam Springs. I ran the fireworks calls. In 2018, before the ordinance was passed, we had 45 911 calls. After you passed the ordinance in 2019, we had 25. In 2020, we had 21. In this past year, in 22, we had 15. So we've seen a significant decrease. Again, we have an ordinance, in my opinion, that we have guidelines. We have enforcement action that we can take. If we don't have the ordinance, in my opinion, they're still going to shoot them, and we're going to be chasing people all night trying to catch them. So, again, any questions, or I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you, Chief. Directors? Thank you, sir. So, in light of what Chief Kreiner had asked from this discussion, Philip, I would look to you to kind of tell us the direction that you would like for this board to go. Do you want to hear from them? Do they want this brought back? How do we want to proceed from here?
This is what I heard. Obviously, there's differences of opinion across the whole board. What I would take away from this is to, being that if there's any objections from the board, that staff to take a look at the timing as it relates to item number 4 for entities to be able to shoot fireworks until midnight with a special permit. Maybe that needs to come back to be 10 p.m. instead of midnight. Maybe on July 4th, being that July 4th is not a set holiday, it moves from day to day every year, that maybe we shouldn't let fireworks go till midnight on July 4th. Maybe it should stay at 10 o'clock. And I think there was a third one that I wrote down. I don't know that the changing of the days, but we'd be happy to take a look at that. The issue of public property, we wrote it originally to say, to believing that we're talking about parks and those type things. The comment about city streets, I think, as well, is a great comment. And so I think if we're going to hold that, we need to do a better job of publicizing that no fireworks on public property. That means you can't set them off in the street. So barring any objections from the board, I would say if you wanted us to look at those couple of changes, I know Director Allen has a different opinion that would like to see it maybe go away altogether, but I think those were some comments that have value, and we can take a look at that and draft a change to that to maybe tweak those 2 timing issues, and then do a better job at promoting that, shooting off in the streets is not allowed. And
thank you. And then, I'm sorry, go ahead.
see one head nod. And
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I would like to see And this is what I would like to see on item 1, on the times. What you said about item 4 is what I would agree with. I would change this to the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, eliminate just for 3 days, 12 to 10, and on July 4th from 12 to 10, or 12 to 11. I don't want to see it going to midnight on the July the 4th. Those are the changes that I would like to see.
Thank you, Carol. Lisa?
I have a question on the street. Is there a reason that people do it on the street? Is it safer? Is it, I mean...
It's been my experience, the street is typically has the vertical clearance, right?
Oh,
That there's no trees, you can shoot it up and see it. You know, if you have trees in your yard, depending on that, you might be able to see it. It's level. Yeah, Marla's saying it's level. It's hard surface.
So we're going to take that away from them.
Well, I think the way it's worded, I mean, the point was well made today. The way it's worded, the street's public property. So, you know, shoot them off in your driveway. It does create some problems because there is clearly some folks, I won't say that everybody does it, but there are some folks who set them off in the street and they don't clean it up. I mean, that happens. Some people, I believe, do clean it up, but I'm sorry, Director Burns.
Oh, I think Madam Mayor, I think the concept is, you know, I mean, I could give you a whole history of Detroit and Devil's Night and, you know, from back in my fire service days, but I'd have to dig out cobwebs, right? And I don't have time for that tonight. Why we didn't have them historically across the U.S. and all the problems we had. What we have done with the city is we have a strong code enforcement. I do have one wood shingle structure in my neighborhood, and it's an older home, which eventually the water will come in and replace it. The last shingle structure fire I went on was actually in Dawn Hill. If you remember, the apartments out there were shake shingled, and obviously you can imagine what that happens. But with building codes now and building construction, it is difficult to get those on fire. A roof, a gutter with leaf would catch on fire much easier, and so people tend to move away from your house. It's like frying a turkey when it's frozen in the garage. It's just a bad idea. And so from a safety standpoint and a visual standpoint, what occurs in my neighborhood, and I won't give the name of the street, but it's next to a cemetery. They do that because the trees are around, and that's where they shoot off their fireworks. And the neighbors that do that also do not pick up the trash in their neighborhood, and I pick up their trash for them. And I also take a leaf blower and clean up their street for them on a regular basis. So I'm OCD, and I also pick up their dog poo for them. So I mean, sometimes that's what it takes to keep your neighborhood clean. But once again, you know, lightning strikes cause structural fires more predominantly in this part of the world. But yes, over time, as we shoot fireworks, there is going to be an incident. That's the reality. There will be an incident. If you talk and drive with your cell phone on, and it's against state law, eventually you're going to get pulled over or you will get in a wreck. But there's a state law, and you see them every day. So we're kind of here with this ordinance. It's a tough one. I applaud you, and I hope all these times work for you. I've said it before, they're very magical to tell a citizen to stop at 11. Good luck. Good luck with that 11 o'clock. Good luck with midnight. Coming out of COVID for 2 years, celebrating freedom, looking across the world and what's going on globally. And if a few Americans in a small town of 17,000 want to have fun, good for them. I'm a non-participant. My last participation was in the county, and it was a significant firework display on a flatbed trailer, and we caught some stuff on fire. Yes, they are very dangerous. if you don't use them properly. And but anything could happen at any time, and I hope the revisions, try to make as many as you happy as possible. But it's going to happen again, and these folks, that's what they do. They celebrate freedom and they like fireworks.
Madam Mayor,
Thank you. Yes, Carol.
I do believe an ordinance or no ordinance, people are going to shoot off fireworks, whether you do have one or not. And I'm not sure that they will look at the times. I mean, that's just, I grew up with fireworks. I don't like fireworks, but I grew up with fireworks in the neighborhood. My sister loved shooting off fireworks. But I do think we have to respect at a certain time of night that people want to go to bed and sleep without being interrupted, whether it's a holiday or not. I'm comfortable with whatever any times people want, but I do think it needs to be limited at least after midnight.
Madam Mayor?
Thank you. Yes, David?
I agree with what Director Rissler said earlier, that she said she'd had several respond, and that there were people who said, I'd rather not have it, but I know it's going to be there, so I'd just rather have the date and hour changed. And I appreciate the hour options that Mr. Patterson brought up. I don't quite understand why we have to have even 3 days. I would rather it be July 3rd and 4th, that's it. That would be my suggestion, and 12 to 10 p.m. on each of those nights. And
Thank you, David.
definitely changing the 10 p.m. on the outside organization. And then, Philip, on number 8, the cleanup paragraph, there's a section there about shooting them from a motor vehicle, and I think that was supposed to be in the paragraph below about transportation.
Thank you.
So after the comments that we've heard and the discussion we've had, Philip, then we will leave it to you to make adjustments or changes to that ordinance and bring it back to this board for discussion and vote.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So next we will move on to item G, which is offer from the Oklahoma Secretary of Energy and Environment Department to purchase Siloam Springs Water Resource Company property in Oklahoma. And I believe, Mr. McCurk, this will be when some of your questions perhaps will be answered, sir, hopefully during this discussion. So, Philip?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Board. So, I brought this back because GRDA upped their offer, and I thought it appropriate for you to see it and have discussion about it. I want to go through some of the history so that everybody remembers where we got and how we got to where we are. If we could go to the slides, there you go, thank you. So back in April of this year, we briefed the board on an offer from the Oklahoma Secretary of Energy and Environment to purchase on behalf of the Grand River Dam Authority 300 plus acres of the roughly 453 acres that the city owns in Oklahoma through the Siloam Springs Water Resource Company. It's not owned by the city itself, but owned by the Water Resource Company. At that time, GRDA was offering $1,106 per acre. There was discussion about a conservation easement, reducing the value of the acreage. We talked about it again in front of the board on July 5th. And based on all of those discussions, I took away that we needed to look at maybe 4 issues. We needed to tell GRDA if the city was interested in selling anything, that it ought to be a market rate price. We needed to confirm with the health department that they would agree that if the board wanted to sell any part of the required buffer zone around the water intake, that the Arkansas Department of Health would allow that under the same provisions that they allowed some of the buffer zone to be sold to GRDA for the Woka kayak park. And I was asked to contact the Cherokee Nation to see if there was any interest from them in purchasing the property. And then I also felt like it was worthwhile to ask the Oklahoma Secretary of Energy and Environment if they were interested or would be interested in purchasing a lesser amount of acreage, because there's multiple parcels over there that we own, and or purchasing a conservation easement rather than fee title to the property. So on the slide that you see there before you, that's the 453 acres that the city owns in Oklahoma. Section 17 consists of the water intake, and the property above that is the land that has the underground water pipe, the main water transmission line. Now there are two of them feeding our water treatment plant. The line crosses into Arkansas at the very upper right side of that. And then there are three parcels consisting of just under 100 acres further south in Section 19, Section 20, and Section 29. So after the discussion in April, we contacted the Arkansas Health Department to determine their extent or to ask them to confirm the exact extent of the buffer zone. The required buffer zone, the minimum required buffer zone, the way it's worded in their regulations, is 300 feet on either side of the river's edge, a quarter mile upstream and a quarter mile downstream of the intake. But that's the minimum, so we wanted to make sure that that was what they were agreeing to. On this map, you can see in the area where it says the Siloam Springs Water Resource property to remain, that area on the south side of the river, on the bottom half of the river, that's the 300-foot buffer zone and the quarter mile upstream. Downstream, it's not quite a quarter mile on the north side because of and actually on both sides of the river because of the dam. Water can't come back upstream but from downstream of the dam, so the dam makes that buffer zone actually a little shorter downstream of that. The health department went on to say that yes, if the city wished to sell part of the buffer zone, that they could do that under the same restrictions and conveyance restrictions that we did for the Woka Kayak Park. But the health department went further to say our recommendations in order of preference are that the city retain all of the land contiguous to the water intake facility, which would include the 221 acres, which is what you see there on this slide. Retain ownership, and then B, option B, retain ownership of the land within the restricted buffer area, plus an additional 100 to 200 feet upstream of the intake facility's buffer in case the intake facility is ever expanded, right? Because the upstream buffer is based on a quarter mile of the current intake. If we doubled the size of the intake and expanded it, then we need another 100 feet or so in that area where the red line crosses the river. We need to move that line a little bit further south. And then their least recommendation, preferred option, was retain ownership of the land just around the intake, allowing for expansion of the intake, but being able to sell the buffer area if that's what the city chose to do. I want to show for the record also the three other parcels down south. I'll come back to this slide in a minute. All of the parcels that the city owns are in the 100-year floodplain according to the FEMA maps. So we also contacted the Cherokee Nation in July to ask them if there was any interest. On August the 25th, I finally got a response from Mr. Brian Hunt, who's the Senior Real Estate Development Manager for the Cherokee Nation, indicating that the Cherokee Nation did not have interest in acquiring any other property. And then I also sent 3 questions to GRDA wondering if they would be willing to purchase those 3 parcels only, the roughly just less than 100 acres, which are, as I stated earlier, much further south of where our intake is, much further upstream of the intake. In addition, I asked GRDA if they would be willing to purchase a conservation easement over the 221 acres and manage that on behalf of the city. And then lastly, I asked GRDA if they would purchase a conservation easement over all 317 acres of all 4 parcels. And in September, I received the revised offer from GRDA to purchase all roughly 317 acres for $22,250 per acre, which is not that far from the average price of the 3 comparable sales that I was able to find using the Oklahoma GIS. And I've got a slide there that shows the 3 sales that I was able to find. 42-acre sale in 2016 for just over $2,700 per acre. In 2019, a 404-acre sale for $2,351 per acre. And then up in the top, 259 acres sold in 2020 for $2,250 an acre. That's the acreage that GRDA purchased from Mr. Langley. That property is in the 100-year floodplain. The 2 other parcels are not in the 100-year floodplain. So using it as a comparative sale, that the offer that from GRDA today is the same dollar amount that they offered Mr. Langley in 2020. It's a little less than what you average out those 3 sales to be, which would be $2,446. But again, 2 of those properties are not in the 100-year floodplain. So I bring this back to you as a board to ask you how you wish for us to respond to the GRDA offer. In my humble opinion, you have 3 options, and there are more, but I think boiling them down to 3 is probably the best. And so those 3 options would be to sell the 221 acres in section 17, along with the 28 acres, the 25 acres, then the 42 acres in the other sections, totaling $317, $317 acres, $2,250 per acre for a total of $713,655. But if you were to choose to do that, I would recommend that you say you want a conservation easement, you want a first right of refusal, and within that conservation easement that no improvements can be done to the land without further approval by the city. And the second option is basically the same as the first, but it only includes those 3 parcels down south, not the 221 acres. That would be just under 96 acres, totaling $215,662 total. Again, conservation easement, first right of refusal, and no improvements being made without further city approval. I don't know that there would be any improvements on this land, as much as I know GRDA on the 221 acres was talking about a small boat launch, maybe some walking trails. So I don't know if that's, if this is the option that the board would choose, that no improvement subject to future approval by the city is as important as it is on the 221 acres. And the third option is to say, thank you GRDA, but we're not interested, or thank you Oklahoma Secretary of Energy and Environment, but the city's not interested. So with that, Madam Mayor and Board, I would be happy to hear comments from the board, giving us some direction as to where you would like staff to go. If you're interested in considering the sale of any of the property, I would ask that you direct staff to negotiate the deal points and bring that back at a later date. If not, we are perfectly happy to tell the Secretary and GRDA that you're not interested.
Thank you, Philip. Directors.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, Marla.
Wait,
It.
you have to ask the
Public.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. Is there anyone in the public that would like to make comments on what has been presented at this time? Yes, sir.
James McGuirk, 412 West University Street, and I'm for not selling it at all.
Thank you,
Thank you.
sir. Anyone else? If not, directors. And Marla?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When Mr. Patterson was speaking, it was hard for me to hold my tongue because there's more history than just what was there. The original lake bed in that property that we got was between 800 and 1,000 acres or more. Because of not taking care of it through city officials or the resource center, what their group, we lost it through a lawsuit. We did that again a few years ago. We lost another large tract of land. And what thoroughly irritates me is the tract of land is the one that GRDA bought from Langley for 2025. GRDA had the gall to offer us just a little over 1,000, thinking that they can get it easily. I think it's crazy to sell any of it because we do not know what is going to happen once that Woka Park is up and running. We have no idea. And it is a city's property, the groups. It is their responsibility to take care of it, and I don't care if it is a burden. You know, sometimes my kids are burdens, but I take care of them. You know, but this is a big deal. This isn't just, you know, what are we going to do? No. We do have no idea what a conservation easement or any rights to justify what's being built on is going to happen once it's in the hand of someone else. It's okay. We can say that and then sign the paperwork, and then they take it over there and they do away with all of those guidelines and rules because GRDA wants to do something else with it. I think the best thing for us to do is just to sit tight, tell them no, and take care of business because we haven't done it and we've lost 2 large tracts of good land. And I don't care if it is a floodplain. That's not an excuse to sell. I think we need to keep it, and I'm very adamant about that. I'm only on the board till the end of the year, and so they'll probably wait to bring it up again after I'm gone. But I'm a big no. Don't sell it.
Madam Mayor?
Thank you, Marla. David?
I was confused. Philip, did you say on the attachment E that had the 404 acres that was sold in 2019, is that the piece that Langley sold to? Yeah, that's the map I'm looking at.
259 acres.
259? Oh,
Top.
up at the top.
Yes.
That's what was sold by Langley to the GRDA?
Yeah, the GRDA offered to buy a conservation easement from Langley for $75 an acre for 30 years. And Langley, my understanding, and it's limited just to what hearsay, but my understanding is Langley said, I don't want to wait 30 years for the money, so buy me out. And they offered them the same dollar amount based on $75 an acre for 30 years.
So, so all of that property, that 259 acres, was at one time owned by the city of Siloam?
That's my understanding, but I don't have the.
What about the 404 south of it?
I don't believe that was ever part of the city.
Okay.
I don't believe that was part of the lake bed.
Okay. I am aware of what has been discussed here on Langley. I don't know anything about it, but I do know the first time that I believe this happened where the city was sued and there was a settlement made where the city lost property that it owned, that was a citizen-owned asset in the state of Oklahoma. I would like to, and I think I've asked this before, but I would like to have a history of all settlements or lawsuits where the city or the SSWRC lost property in Oklahoma, going back to as long as we've held it. And I'd like the board to be able to receive this at least middle of next week. This is something that has happened before and should never have been allowed to happen again. And I was not aware until I got back on this board that it had happened again. The land was purchased with taxpayer dollars for a reason. I'm not certain how long the city has owned all of this land, but there's no reason to be selling it. We don't need the money, even for fixing Sager Creek. We don't need the money. It's not a major ordeal as to the price being a reason to sell it. I'm also frustrated to learn that there was land that we lost that the GRDA turned around and bought in their roundabout way. And, you know, who knows why this man went and took it. Maybe it was in order just to sell it. I don't know. But it is frustrating that GRDA would offer such a lowball price compared to what they paid for this. And the question I have, I keep coming back to, what is the point of selling anymore? Why does GRDA want the land? Because they already own so much there now. Why would they want it? That's the question I can't seem to see anywhere, except they just are wanting to buy it. But as I said, I believe that the city bought it for a reason many decades ago, however long it was, and I'm not sure, unless we have a really good reason, why we should divest ourselves of any more. But I would definitely request that we, as a board, get a history of the lawsuits and settlements where the city lost property in Oklahoma.
Director Allen, I'll be happy to ask staff to put that together. I can't promise that I'll have it by the middle of next week, but we'll get it to you.
It should be easy to do a research on it with LexisNexis or whoever.
We'll put that together.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, Brad.
So I don't understand what we don't understand about conservation easements. And if you do a little background, Oklahoma Scenic River Commission, if you spent any time paddling in Oklahoma, so for me, you know, I don't want to date myself, but it's 1970 from inner tubes to, you know, when I could afford stuff later on as an adult. And I watched Oklahoma Scenic River Commission enforce regulations to clean up the water. No parking on gravel bars, no foam, no glass. You could go on with the regulation. And then that was encompassed into GRDA. And so GRDA started getting into regulation, and a lot of us complained. And then we looked at it later on as we continued to get older and use the river for different means. And we started seeing why those regulations worked. Our neighbors live downstream. It is no fault of any board member, past or present, what occurred when the dam broke. The essence of that lawsuit, from my simple research, and I am a simple person, so the dam broke, and the wording clearly just read that that property is to the water's edge. So when the lake disappears, guess what? And that's how that gentleman ended up with that, and you can't win in a court of law. And then at the last discussion we had, I sat here and I go, you know, I didn't play video games at the firehouse because, well, we didn't have them back then, so that solved that problem. And the time frames just didn't seem right to me. So I did a little research, and here's my research. Minutes of the board of the Illinois Water Development Company, Inc., held January 2nd, 2001. Board of Directors, Illinois Water Development Company, Inc., held January 2nd, 2001, City Administrative Building. Here had a meeting, a Board of Directors. Here's who was attended. Carr, Fuller, Allen, Long were present. Anglin and Nation were absent. Van Pook was the mayor. And at that time, they appointed Flynn. Let's see, a copy of the minutes from the January 4, 2000 meeting. A motion was made by Flynn and seconded by Carr to approve the minutes as presented. A voice vote was called for the motion. A motion was made by Flynn and seconded by Allen to nominate Judy Nation as president and Patrick Carr as vice president. So that's what occurred there. And then you just keep going on, and you can get a copy of that, and I'm sure it's going to be presented to you by the city administrator. It's real simple homework. And then you can go on later on in life, and you could look at, let's see, 6/23 of '09. David Allen, I would appreciate receiving what I asked for on the language suit of 2 years ago, what was given to the board, what the city attorney wrote to the administrator. As soon as possible, I'd like to also have a date of about when this occurred. And so we can't sit here and act like we didn't know and there's innocence. It's not Director Allen's fault. It's not Madam Mayor's fault. It was the hand that was dealt. Those are the facts. And so we sit here and we ignored that. Here's what's going to happen if we ignore what's occurring at WOCA. WOCA is a reality. It is a regional hub for paddlers. And as I look at the board, I'm assuming that most of you are not avid paddlers. I'm just going to assume that right off the bat, right? Do you spend 5 days out of the week on the river during the summertime? These are all questions. I would consider most of us recreational paddlers, where we just go and we enjoy the river. But this draws in folks that are going to come from all around. And if you do not get proactive and make conservation easements, it is once again non-accessible, non-enforceable land. It is our percolator to keep the water pure, and people will make river access. It is happening in the state of Arkansas even as we speak today, and that will be addressed going forward in 2023. It's going to be a significant issue, and that's just what's occurring. From a tax revenue standpoint, if you go through the presentation that we had earlier, Oklahoma, it's generated a $12 million tourism business. And so when I brought up several years ago when we talk of tourism dollars, if we could just get a piece of tourism dollars in tax revenue. And so the city of Siloam is going to have that potential. To me, that land is sacred. I was only a child when I first swam down at that lake. And it was a big outing for us to come from Cookson Hills on Highway 10 to go to the lake and swim. But here we have the potential to make this land permanent. If you go upstream to the north of that property, a large parcel of land, about 900 acres, have been purchased, and it is going to the Northwest Arkansas Land Trust. It is a conservation group. The Nature Conservancy is a conservation group. Arkansas Natural Heritage Commission is also another conservation group. And that's what is occurring in Northwest Arkansas and in Oklahoma, is taking these lands so they cannot be developed. So they cannot be developed. And they kept in their natural state. And it's just like we're worried about detention or retention ponds and planting the right thing. That is what's occurring along the creek beds. If you go in and you allow development and sell out the development because we're greedy and we want a higher number, you will get a higher number, and you will get the complete opposite of what you're desiring. You will get development. The only development you're going to get down there is passive development. It's just like going out to City Lake and walking the bike trail. You might get people walking. A passive boat ramp is a slip that only allows, it's not for trucks and trailers. Paddlers carry their things in. That's what they do. If you're paddling from Oklahoma or from Arkansas and you want to get around the dam, you pick up your paddleboard, your kayak, or your canoe, and you ruck it around the obstacle, and you put it in the other side. So the potential for us, not today, but for the next generation, to have a recreational area that is kept pristine as you remember it as a young person, as I remember it, to maintain that, it's such an invaluable resource. And when we start going, we're going to hold out for money. Is it about money? Is it about because we don't like GRDA? What's the chip on the shoulder on there? I would encourage you to drive down to Watts and try to make access to the backside of the dam. The dam is being reinforced with a coffer dam with the materials that were removed for the Woka Kayak Park. And the coffer dam eliminates the hazard, which is a hydraulic, the drowning machine, which we've had issues with in the past, and we've spent a lot of your tax dollars with emergency services down there pulling bodies out for days at a time, so you're dredging for folks. We've removed that. It also aerates the water. Not only that, when the price increased in reinforcing the dam, the city was not asked to step up. We kept the same flat price. What we have is potential and opportunity, and fighting that and looking for something that doesn't exist is concerning. And we have a history of saying no to opportunity. And this is an opportunity to create a space that'll bring people in from a regional and a larger area and create a tax base through tourism that the largest town to live at, to buy your materials out, your food and supplies, for camping, for anything, is right here in Siloam Springs. And the only way I know how to offset increasing taxes to our folks is by increasing revenue that doesn't come out of their pockets, anybody here, and that's tourism. And that's what we have right in front of us, the potential to create additional revenue to offset costs to citizens. My observations. Thank you.
Madam Mayor?
Thank you. Yes, David?
Brad, what was the point of the January 2nd, 01 minutes to name off who was at the IRWC meeting?
No, Director Allen, you clearly stated you have no knowledge.
No, I didn't say that.
Okay.
I don't know of any. I'm the one who actually said I was aware of the first time we lost land. I was not aware of the second time that we lost land, the so-called Langley that's been being discussed. You may have been on the board at that time.
Yeah.
I wasn't. But I'm not sure what the point of bringing up the June 3rd, 09 email where I'm actually asking, I'd appreciate a copy of what the board had done before I became mayor on 1/1 of 09, because I had no clue what was being discussed. What's the point of bringing that up here tonight?
Madam Mayor.
I'm still talking. What's the point of naming Nation, Carr, Fuller, Long, Flynn were in attendance to simply name them on the minutes of January 2nd of 01? There's a meeting every year at the beginning of the Illinois Water Resource Company. You've been on it before as a board member. So I'm not sure the point of bringing these up except to try to lay it out that I have no knowledge, which I never said I don't have any knowledge. I am lost as to the comment of the potential to make this land permanent, and that we have an opportunity here. There's an opportunity by selling protected land to another organization that's going to protect it. The land's already protected by the city of Siloam through the Illinois, or the Siloam Springs Water Company. So I'm really lost and confused as to this so-called research that you did as to what the point of it was. We lost property that we shouldn't have lost. I was aware of one. I was not aware of another, or even if there's more than two. Maybe you were, I was not. So I've asked for that. But I don't think handing off land to anybody, GRDA, Arkansas Resource Company, or whatever other company you named up, that's going to be conservatory, is going to benefit the citizens who own that land, most especially when the land is currently owned to protect the land. It's not owned to develop it. There's never been a plan to develop it.
Thank you, David. Yes, Brad?
I just clearly stated my research. You don't have to figure out the point of it. I have clearly stated conservation easements. We do not have one. There's 18 squatters hanging down there. We clearly stated as a board that this property has been mismanaged. So anything can occur down there. I just spouted off several acronyms of companies that are proactive in the state of Arkansas and in Oklahoma that are ensuring land conservation practices are occurring, and that they take care of it. Cities don't take care of it. It's not a tax burden, and they manage land properly. Land needs to be managed, and there needs to be regulation on it, and you need to have the resources to be able to enforce those regulations. And so if the board is going to move in a direction, and all of a sudden after many, many years we're going to regulate these large parcels of land that we've ignored for years, then we need to be aware that there are going to be additional burdens on the city, which means you're going to have to hire staff. And then we cross border jurisdiction, and it gets fairly complicated. With this land and with the development down there, there is the potential for tax increase on the city of Siloam. And it's really that simple. It's nothing personal. It's none of that. Boards are dealt with bad hands, and they have to make bad decisions, and they get to make good decisions. I just believe it's an opportunity for us it's not about the money, it's about preserving that land that is not in Arkansas, that's out of state. It's just like we own it right now, and it's the same thing, except it's going to be managed by somebody else, and we're going to have accountability for it. And it's clearly stated by the city administrator that conservation easement and accountability will come to the board. And if we're afraid that GRDA is ever going to sell it, we would get first right of refusal to buy the land back, which is never going to happen. Clearly stated in the presentation is that this water services not only us, but the community all the way down to Tahlequah. So you're looking at Scraper, all these little communities that go along Highway 10 thrive off that water. And what we're looking at is being a good neighbor and ensuring long-term quality of water. And also for us, that's the reinforcement of the coffer dam, to make sure that we never lose the dam again. If the water level drops, for those of us that have spent any time at WOCA, and if you're very curious, and I'm assuming all of us are, is that they've spent a significant amount of money to create a gate that would shut the kayak park off that's going to be down there to ensure that we always have water. And so it's not like nobody's being a good neighbor. Just the reality of it is that it's an opportunity, my observations, for us to create a area that for the next generations to come, we'll be able to go down and enjoy.
Thank you, Brad.
Madam Mayor.
Yeah, Lisa, just a minute. Jay, I believe that you were going to speak to maybe one of the legal aspects of this.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I did want to respond briefly to the request for information about lawsuits involving this property. I am relatively familiar with the history of the property in Oklahoma, and I will certainly tomorrow do a search, do Westlaw search, and look for any cases that would involve the Illinois Water Development Corporation or adverse possession or any of those terms involving this property that I wouldn't be aware of for some reason. But to my knowledge, the Langley decision is the only case where land was lost. The only other lawsuit, that one was before my tenure here. The only other case that I'm aware of was a case that was brought by Mr. Farley, who there was a piece of land that he and his sons had been farming, making hay on for many years, and they also hunted it on occasion, and they wanted to continue that use. They filed a lawsuit. That case wound up settling. We made a deal with the Farley family to give them an exclusive lease so they could continue to hunt and make the hay, but we retained possession of the property. Title did not transfer. So and those are the only two cases that I'm aware of, but again, I will double check to see if there's something maybe, that goes way back or something that's out there. And I would just add that if anybody does know of something else and you have specifics, if you could get those to me, that would help, obviously, in my search, the more information that I have. But as of right now, those are the only two situations that I'm aware of.
All right, Madam
Thank you,
Mayor,
Jay.
I would like to
just a moment, David.
adjust my request regarding what he said. Just to not say lawsuits or settlements, but to say involving the city. That's what I had actually said where we lost property. I just want to, where the city or Siloam Springs Water Resource.
The Water Resource Board.
Involving us in Oklahoma. Not necessarily lawsuit or settlement, but anything that involved us, whether
Which
we
would
lost
include
property or
what you
not.
were talking about.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Lisa?
So I have a question, Philip. Some people want to keep the land, and then we're also worried about conservation. Does NRCS offer conservation easements for cities? I know they do.
Give me the
farmers
acronyms
and
again. I didn't-
NRCS, National. Leaf knows.
Conservation Service.
So the city could put a conservation easement on their own land.
Okay.
I think that would, it's kind of, I would, and Leaf could speak to this maybe better, but I don't know that, a landowner generally is going to put a conservation easement on their own land, because a conservation easement sort of restricts what, the landowner can do. And in the case, yes, a city board, I guess, feeling like a future board might want to develop the property, then there might be a reason to put a conservation easement on it today. But generally, if I'm a private landowner, and Leaf, you can correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm a private landowner and somebody is, wanting to do a conservation easement, they're wanting to prevent me from developing it, prevent me from clear cutting it, whatever it is, so that and I get value out of that in exchange for not getting value out of the land. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Yeah, my husband was the the NRCS National Director for Easements for farmland out of DC. And so that's what I was wondering. If we could put our own conservation easement on it, I agree. I don't think we need to sell the land, and we say we didn't manage it, but I also heard in a later meeting that, staff would go out there and there would be a lock on the gate. Well, if it's my land, I'm going to cut the lock. I'm going to make sure that I maintain my own property, because I don't want somebody else taking my own property. And I don't see a full-time staff member having to go out and manage the land, but I can see us looking into conservation ourselves, and I can see us managing it ourselves. Like I said, it's simple as you go out there, you can't get on your property, you cut the lock like any other person would do with their own property. And so that's where I stand.
Thank you, Lisa. Anyone else? Carol?
I had some ideas going in, but I always enjoy hearing everybody's information, their thoughts, and sometimes it changes my mind, and sometimes it doesn't. My main concern is preserving the quality of the water, whether we own it or somebody else has a conservation right to it. I don't know, do we have any plans at the present time for any of this land? Does the city have any plans for it?
Not to my
Other
knowledge.
than just to let it sit?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. I think as the Woka Park takes hold and we have a lot of tourism, it's going to take more effort to manage that land, to keep people off of it, and other things that could happen. I don't have a problem selling 3 of the parcels, but I would want a conservation easement on it because I want to make sure the water stays pristine. I want to make sure that the banks stay without any erosion on them. I want to preserve that area. I wish I would have grown up and been here when Lake Francis was here, because I hear it was a fabulous place. But those are my thoughts right now. I don't think we need the money. And I don't think it's about the money. It's just about the land.
Thank you, Carol. Reed?
Madam Mayor, my concern as well is not so much of selling the land or keeping the land, but if we as a city are going to keep it, we need to manage it. We need to step up. And if we are not or will not, then we need to sell it to somebody who will. But if we have a plan in place and we can see if it's within the budget, great. But if it's a detriment to us, then we need to do alternatives. But regardless, we need to see that it's able to be maintained and taken care of properly, no matter whether we own it or someone else.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Brad.
I would just say, I'll give City Lake as an example. It took over 40 years to develop City Lake. I was out there Sunday evening to catch the sunset, and I regret ever mentioning how beautiful the sunset is at City Lake, because there were families out there paddling, and I had a hard time keeping my dog calm on the board. It was exciting. There were people on the dock fishing. There were people on the walking trail. There was activity. It was bustling on a Sunday evening about 6:30ish, and that's what I see when I see that area there. I see a piece of land that could have energy and life just like it had with Lake Francis back in the day, and folks can go in that area and enjoy it in some nature and be respectful of that land. I do think it's sacred in some nature, and I've stated that before. It's a connectivity piece. You can go back to the Civil War. You could go back. There's just a ton of history down there, all the way back to the indigenous people that were here long before us, obviously. And I think number one would be a great option. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, David?
I was just going to ask, Jay was speaking. Jay, did the Farley thing or the Langley thing happen first? Do you know?
The Langley case did.
Happened first?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that was, like I said, I came here in 2008, and it was concluded by then, and then the Farley case was filed in either late 2008 or 2009, I believe.
I think thank you, Jay. Marla brought up that the Woka Park is not opened yet, and I believe this is the cart before the horse. If we're going to be doing anything with that property, that we ought to wait and see how the reaction is to the park opening. And once it is, if there is more problem keeping up with the property, then maybe that's the wisest thing to do. But to preempt it opening with a decision that we don't know if it's going to be a problem or not, I think we ought to hold off to wait for that to be open. And then I go back to, even if we do sell it, GRDA is not a government entity. GRDA is a company out to make a profit. They may be calling themselves quasi whatever, but they are not going to be any more deciding to protect the land than the city of Siloam has done as to why it got it in the first place. And it had to do with protecting our water intake. So I'm not sure if it was to be bought. I guess the city has actually dealt with the state of Oklahoma, but the state of Oklahoma is dealing for GRDA, obviously. So I'm not sure if they are going to do any better of a job than the city of Siloam has done in terms of disallowing any development on it. And that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Philip?
So if I may be so bold to wrap this up, Director Allen, just one response to that. GRDA, the state of Oklahoma wrapped under the GRDA umbrella the Scenic Rivers Commission, and that's what's really driving this piece of it, more than GRDA itself. But if I may, trying to get some direction from the board, out of those three options that I laid out, I believe that, and please, I'm going to speak for each one of you, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but don't shoot the messenger. Director Allen is, would prefer to reject the offer in total.
For now, just.
Well, I mean, it's the offer today.
Yeah.
I can't
I'm
ask
saying
them
when Woka comes open, it may be the wise thing to do.
And you have no interest in considering option 2, which would be selling the 3 southern parcels, correct?
No.
Okay. And Director Smiley would entertain at least option 2. Director Burns would entertain option 1 and or 2 possibly. Director Sappington would be option 3, opposed to any sale. And that's as far as I got. So I understand conservation easements and all that, but that's assuming that there's no sell. Director Ressler.
I would say thanks, but no thanks.
Okay. So Director
Director
Carroll, you're I mean, I understand it's a difficult decision. I understand it's controversial, but I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't bring the latest offer back to you and put you on the, put it on the table for discussion. So,
Option 2.
option 2. All right. I don't, I wish the mayor could vote.
They can in a tie.
Why not get Mindy's feedback and let us
I mean,
know?
that's the next thing is for me to discuss with Director Hunt and see maybe where she falls. But in my humble opinion, I don't think selling the 221 acres is even on the table. I think the only thing that, if there was any consideration, it might be to the southern 3 parcels. But I'll hold off. I'll discuss with Director Hunt in a couple of weeks, and we'll see where she goes, and if it's leaning to selling the 3 parcels, I'll come back with a resolution asking you to direct us to negotiate the sale and subject to all that stuff, and you can vote it up or down at that time if that's okay.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
can we know
Yes.
before, can you give us a heads up,
Sure.
Mindy, what Mindy says, well in advance?
Madam Mayor,
Yes, Marla.
tonight was the first time it was mentioned that we could put our own conservation easement on it. And I found that quite interesting. So you can add that to mine.
Well, clearly, I think if, regardless of what you decide, assuming you sell part of it or don't sell any of it, that investigating a conservation easement for the city that would tie the future board's hands of developing it, wouldn't necessarily prevent them from selling it, but the conservation easement. Now, Lee.
I mean, that's what we want to do.
Hang on one second. So I'm not an expert on conservation easements, so sir, if you could help me here for a second. If the city were to put a conservation easement on the property, generally that conservation easement could be held by the city and a future board could take away the conservation easement. The only way to prevent that would be to give a conservation easement to some entity. And we'll talk off, you agree with that?
I do.
Okay.
Yes.
So we can talk offline about what entities are out there, and it may be you're the one that you mentioned, there may be others. There may be an Oklahoma land conservation like there's an Arkansas land conservation, so we have to investigate those options too. Because if you just give the conservation easement to yourself, a future board could wipe away with it, right? If you give it to a entity, then, you know, now you've actually given it, and you've given them value to the land, and they could tell you, you know, that you can't do anything with it in the future. Anyway, if that's okay, at least from where we stand with a split concept, I'll discuss with Director Hunt. I'll let you know if we're going to bring it back or not, and we'll also talk about, we'll start some research on conservation easements and go from there.
Yes, sir. I think that is agreeable by everyone.
One last thing, Mayor.
Yes.
Since they were introduced, I would like Director Burns to provide the minutes and the email that he brought up to the board from January 2nd of '01 and just June 3rd of '09.
Brad, could you share that with Philip so that he could then send that to the board? Thank you, sir.
If you don't mind, Director Burns, forward it to the city clerk and ask the city clerk to do it, because I'm going to be out for a little
Perfect.
bit.
Yes.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I just encourage the board to take a look at the Nature Conservancy. So if you get on their website, and they're global, if you will, so they, you know, not only in the United States, but that's a group that's proactive in that sort of thing. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Then with that, we are moving on to the administrator's report. Philip?
I thought for certain you were going to say you would accept a motion to adjourn in that.
No, sir. You're up.
She heard there was no administrator's report.
Yes. Do I have a motion?
I will go as quickly as I can. I thank you all. Expenditures, we had a expenditure at the airport for 8,000 gallons of Jet A fuel, $31,600. And then under the resolution 6121, which gave us a higher bid amount, the electric department, $98,727 for 25 kVA and 21 37.5 kVA and 5 50 kVA pole top mounted transformers for inventory. So we're still trying to get as many transformers as we can because of the supply chain problems.
Philip, if I might, at this point, I've had several citizens ask me about the fact that they are seeing transformers coming into the
I do
city.
believe we had a small shipment the other day.
And so I just would like for you to clarify that those are already spoken for. These are not transformers that are, you know, they're coming in and now we're going to be opening up, and
No, they are generally already spoken for.
Yes.
To give you an idea of the difficulty that staff is going through and trying to figure out, I mean, all of the transformers that we have contracted to purchase are due, generally speaking, in late spring of 2023. There's some that will likely come in late in 2022, but the majority of them start in late spring 2023, in the summer of 2023, and early fall. So we have a number of preliminary plat subdivisions that need transformers to get to final. We've got some that were already close to being final that we have required to go into a development agreement that they recognize that we're not going to have electric transformers. They're not going to necessarily be able to sell the lots until we have the electricity there to be able to do that. In some cases, no building permits to be issued until we sell the lot, until we get the transformers. And we are trying to go through the preliminary plats today that have been approved but aren't close to being final. So we'll start off with timing based on priority, but then you have somebody who's got an early preliminary plat approval that hasn't put any infrastructure in the ground, and somebody that has a later preliminary plat approval who's put money into the ground, infrastructure in the ground. So they will likely rise higher into the priority list. We have one subdivision that got preliminary plat approval. It was sold. The developer, the purchasing developer, has contracted out and spent money on buying the infrastructure for water and sewer and all that stuff, but didn't realize that right after the sale, or sometime right after the sale, the preliminary plat approval expired because nothing was done. So I have an anomaly in all of that that we have to deal with. But staff is working through that process of, as transformers come in, how do we appropriately allocate them to subdivisions? And likely there may be some where we allocate a few here and a few here and a few here, so that they don't all go to one subdivision when they're all kind of in the same level of priority. Does that make sense? It's a maddening process, and I can tell you that staff is working to try to figure all that out.
Thank you.
The Utility Commission advertisements for applications will be published in the Herald Leader tomorrow and again on the 12th of October. Information's will be posted on the city's webpage and social media. We're going to advertise that we're accepting applications through October 31st. And so probably second meeting in October, I would say that's when I would suggest that the mayor nominate and the board approve a committee of at least 3, maybe no more than 5 of you to do interviews, because we'll have to put notices, advertise the meetings and all that fun stuff, because it will be a meeting of the board because of more than 2. But at that point, do the interviews and prepare to make recommendations before the end of the year. Fall cleanup is scheduled for next week, September the 26th through the 29th. It doesn't occur on Friday because trash pickup does normally not occur on Friday. Also on October the 22nd, staff is going to be organizing a Keep Siloam Springs Beautiful event. That's in conjunction with Keep Arkansas Beautiful. The main cleanup event will start at 8 a.m. In Memorial Park and conclude at 1 o'clock at Memorial Park with some various festivities. We did the broadband feasibility study. We had the report. One of the things that was referenced in there was doing a request for information from internet service providers who might be interested in partnering with the city. So we have been working with the consultant, CCG, to draft out the RFI. We've placed it on the city's website and on the state's website this week. Changes at the newspaper require now we don't have the Sunday Herald Leader, so it'll be in next week's Herald Leader, and I think it'll be in this Sunday's Democrat Gazette. And we'll be forwarding that RFI to as many ISPs that we know of and try to get as much response. I've entered into an agreement with CCG to help us review those responses and go through them and conduct the interviews, and we'll go from there and bring that back to you as time as that time comes. And again, I think that's the RFI response deadline is the end of October, if I'm not mistaken. And then lastly on my list is the Hispanic Heritage Festival. One of the board's 2022 goals was to develop new cultural events and strengthen our quality of life and cultural diversity. The city hosted its first Hispanic Heritage Festival this weekend. We had food trucks, we had 44 vendors, we had kids activity, we had music throughout the day from noon until 4 in and around Memorial Park. A number of staff volunteered to work that festival. I was there until noon, and there were a number of people coming to the festival. I went back out there about 1:30. I don't know how to count large crowds. I estimated 500 plus people milling around. I had one of the police officers that said 2,000 people milling around. So all I can tell you is between 500 and 2,000 people were attending the Hispanic Heritage Festival. At 1:30, I looked at one of the food trucks, and I think there were probably 50 people in line. They sold out of everything. Every food vendor sold out. So I think it was a huge success, and I want to thank the volunteers, the city staff who volunteered to do that. And most importantly, I want to thank Holland Hayden, who really took that event on and bore the burden the last 30 days or so to make sure it became a successful event. So I want to thank her publicly. She did a great job of putting that together. On a separate note regarding Ms. Hayden is she is going to be moving on. She has submitted her resignation as of yesterday. She has a very great opportunity ahead of her, and I'm saddened that she's going to be leaving the city. She's doing it to advance her career, and I support her in that 100%. It's a great opportunity for her, but it's a sad opportunity for us. So we'll take the opportunity. We'll start advertising for it. But I want to wish Holland the best in her future endeavors. And again, she's done great work for the city, but she is moving on, and I've had long conversations with her about her desire. And it is a positive thing. She is moving up, and I wish her well, and will support her in anything that she does. And that's my report, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So at our last meeting for our director's reports, I think I surprised you all by saying no one has anything to say. Do I have a motion to adjourn? So tonight I will ask you, does anyone have anything that they want to say? And if they do, we will go around and let you all make your reports. If you do not, then again, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, David.
I just wanted to recognize Jerry Cavness for coming tonight, representing the American Legion, the new commander for Post 29. His appreciation to the city was very nice, and he reminded us of their annual pancake breakfast fundraiser. But the new flooring in their meeting room was a long time coming, and it has had a lot of problems with flooding many years ago, so I'm glad the city was able to do that. But just the fact he showed up and thanked us was really nice, and I thank them, the American Legion, for their financial support of local charities. It's very nice. I really appreciated Leif Kinberg and Morgan Keeling with the IRWP coming and bringing their info and presentation to our board. I really didn't have any clue what we were going to be told, but I was really impressed and learned a lot, and I appreciated them being here. I told Leif afterwards, I grew up spelunking through Logan Cave, and those blind Ozark cavefish don't taste very good. I'm joking. We never, but we did used to do the cave spelunking all throughout, and you can't do it anymore. But I appreciate them coming here tonight.
Thank you, David. Anyone else?
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Carol.
Since the animal shelter is part of the city of Siloam Springs, one of our departments, I would just like to remind everyone that the shelter is full and they're not able to handle any more pets. But I would encourage people, if you're looking for a new pet, to go out, take a look, and perhaps come home with a new fur baby.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Madam Mayor,
Yes,
I feel
Brad?
like I should make one correction on the Heritage Festival. It was at Memorial Park, but it was held at Chautauqua Amphitheater. I know you despise the name.
No, I do not.
But I just
I love the name.
encourage, I just encourage folks to, if you get a moment and look at the sign down there and the history of the Chautauqua movement, the Hispanic Heritage Festival is a great representation of that cultural diversity, entertainment, word of the day, that sort of thing. So it was awesome. I didn't get to eat there due to the line was extensive. But my mother enjoyed walking around, and she was quite confused on what was happening in Siloam. Why are all these people here? I don't understand. But it was a great event, and I thank the city for continuing to make that particular area, Memorial Park, also a gathering place. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Anyone else? If not, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.